Okay, welcome members. This meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. So first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for other than those already passed on to committee services? Are there apologies, Mark?
Yes, Chair, there's apologies from Councillor June Stone.
Okay. Mark, can we take a register as well of those attending, please?
Yes, okay, Chair. Councillor Angel.
Present.
Councillor Bevan. Councillor Bazina.
Present.
Councillor Bishop.
Present.
Councillor Cushing.
Present.
Councillor Etheridge.
Present.
Councillor Evans.
Present.
Councillor Gare. Councillor Haas. Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Jeremiah. Councillor Leonard.
Present.
Councillor Skivens.
Present.
Councillor Thomas. Councillor Williams.
Present.
And Patricia Cook, co-opted members now. And Cyril Luke. Okay,
Cyril was in the pre-meeting, wasn't he?
He was, yes, Chair.
Might he be having some issues? Could somebody from services actually try and contact him, please?
Yeah, I'll send an email to him now, Chair, but thanks for that. Thank you.
Okay, item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda, in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations? No?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, then well, we'll go on to item 3 then, which is
Actually,
Sorry, Chair.
Councillor
Yes.
Bazina's raised her hand, Chair. Sorry.
I've just had an alert from Anne, Councillor Gare. She was in the pre-meeting, but she's struggling to get into the main meeting, so she's going to keep trying.
what
Thank
about
you,
technical
Councillor Bean.
service? Do you think they can have a look at it, Mark, please?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Okay then, item 3 then on the agenda is to approve and sign the following minutes. Social Services Scrutiny Committee held on the 23rd of November 2021. So we'll check for accuracy. We'll go to page 1, 2, 3, and 4. Are there any changes or points people would like to bring up? Sorry, my voice seems to be going for somebody. If not, can we have somebody to move the recommendation, please?
I move, Chair. Councillor Williams.
Okay, can we have a seconder then, please?
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor James. Okay, then can we have forms then, please, Mark?
Yeah,
I'll abstain, Mark, because obviously I wasn't present.
that's fine, Chair. Yeah, so it's on your screens now.
Chair, I'll abstain as well because I wasn't present.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyone who wasn't present
That's
at the last
right.
meeting can abstain.
I had technical issues, so it kicked me out halfway through the meeting, so I'll be abstaining as well, Chair.
Okay, no problems. Do you know if there are any members joining by phone, Mark, that might need to give a verbal vote?
No, Chair. No members are joining by phone, Chair.
Okay, then we'll go on to item 4 then of the agenda.
Chair, so that's just been carried. Well, there's four votes, 5 votes for, no votes against, and obviously the 5 abstentions. So that's carried with no votes against.
Okay, thanks then. Okay, sorry, I went ahead a bit then. I do apologise, Mark. Okay, item 4 then, consideration of any matter referred to this committee in accordance with the call-in procedure. Do we have any matters called in today?
No, Chair, no matters have been called in for this meeting.
Okay then, so we'll go on to the Social Services Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Plan. Now I'd like to hand over to the Scrutiny Officer for this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, members are asked to consider the Forward Work Programme alongside the Cabinet Work Programme as appendix to the report and to suggest any changes. Just give you a bit of details about the next meeting. That's on the 8th of March. As you can see, there's 3 reports listed for the 8th of March. We've got the Directorate Performance Assessment, Social Services 6 monthly report, 2021-22. And also there's a couple of new additions. The Housing Support Programme is also scheduled for the March meeting, and the Caerphilly Cares Evaluation Report as well is also listed there for the 8th of March. So if members are happy, I would like to seek approval to publish the Social Services Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme onto the Council's website. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Before we go on any further, can I have confirmation what this Caerphilly Cares is? Because I'm just wondering if it's to do with the day centres.
No, it's sorry, can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, of course, Dave.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with the day centres at all. It's a report that you received just over a year ago around the authorities' response to the pandemic. And if you recall, we invoked the buddy scheme, which then came up into Caerphilly Cares. And what you asked for at that meeting was a further update report in 12 months' time. And that's what the report is. It's nothing to do with day centres at all.
Right. Can I ask then, Dave, what the status quo of the day centres is now? Or should we talk about that under the budget?
But I could, yeah, if it's okay with you, I mean, I'll pick up the old position in terms of where we are with COVID. If now is convenient, Chair. If not, I'll come back at a later time in the meeting.
Okay, lovely. Thanks very much then, Dave.
Yeah,
we'll carry on with the agenda as is then for now.
Okay, thank you.
And may I apologise to everyone if you hear a dog scratching at the door. I've got my dog locked in the other room and he's desperate to get out. So if you hear any background noise, my sincere apologies. Right, if everybody's agreeable to that, then can we have somebody to move the recommendation then, please?
I'll move, Chair.
Okay, can we have a seconder then?
I second, Chair.
Okay, can we go to forms then for voting, please?
That should be on your screens now, members.
Okay.
That's been carried unanimously, Chair. 10 votes for, no votes against, and no abstentions.
Lovely. Thanks very much then for that, Mark. Item 6 on the agenda is to receive and consider the following Cabinet reports. Homeless Project Plan Joint Scrutiny Committee, 10th of November 2021, and the draft budget proposals for 2022-23 Joint Scrutiny Committee, 19th of January 2022. So has there been any reports brought forward, Mark?
No, none of those Cabinet reports have been brought forward, Chair.
Okay then, thanks for that. I'd like now to introduce Dave Street, who's going to give a statement from the Corporate Director for Social Services and Housing, and we will invite people to ask questions. Sorry? Oh.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry,
I think I just seen a text message, a mobile phone on the screen. So I think somebody via a mobile is trying to join.
Is it Cyril?
Yeah.
I think so.
Oh, yes, Cyril. Sorry.
They mixed up our emails. We can't get in yet. I don't know what's happening.
Okay then. Well, Dave is just about to give a statement to members' attendance now. So we.
Okay.
All right. Okay
Yeah,
then,
thank
Dave.
you.
Take it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for accommodating me this evening. But I just want to take a few minutes to explain to members some of the ongoing difficulties and pressures that we're continuing to face in social services as a result of the pandemic. Really, I suppose this my request to the Chair is really being driven by my concern that as Wales hopefully moves back to level 0 on Friday, people will start to think that everything is simply back to normal, and that is simply the case. A couple of weeks ago, you would have seen a press release from myself and the other 4 directors of social services in Gwent, asking for support from families and the general community in assisting us to overcome what were extremely acute difficulties that we were experiencing in the post-Christmas period. And while some of those difficulties have improved, they simply haven't gone away. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to explain to you some of the issues that we're still wrestling with. This period has been more difficult than any other for us in terms of staff availability. You'll know how quickly the Omicron virus spread. And even today, we're running currently at around 9% of our staff are unwell. In some areas, domiciliary care, for example, sickness absence is running 17%. And we currently have around 160 staff who are unwell because of either COVID or other related issues. We're currently holding a queue for effectively a waiting list for domiciliary care of around 465 hours. We've been holding that waiting list for some time. It is an improved position. Around the Christmas period, that waiting list was as high as around 1,000 hours, so still very acute. Care homes is still COVID is still a significant factor in our care homes. And of the 26 or so homes that we've got in a borough, only 6 are actually currently COVID-free. And demand for services remains high. You had a report at the last scrutiny around OT, occupational therapy assessments, and we've also got additional demands placed on us by the Health Board to facilitate hospital discharge and also to support the community nursing service within the community. We're having care packages returned to us by independent sector providers because for the same reasons as us, they simply don't have the staff to undertake the work. And we've also had a myriad of guidance off Welsh Government in terms of how to cope with Omicron, all of which have made life pretty difficult for us. In terms of day services, which you alluded to a little earlier, Chair, you'll know the significant investment that we made to enable services to be delivered on a sessional basis. That's still very much where we are. There's been no discernible change on that. And it's not just adult services that we've seen those pressures. In children's services, we're seeing the mental health crisis beginning to emerge. Increasing numbers of children and young people identifying with emotional and mental health issues. We're seeing some examples of what we call chronic parental neglect, and that's now coming to light more routinely as things like health visiting services and other services are coming back up online. And we're continuing to see continued demand for placements with the associated care pressures. And we're not out of the woods yet. As you know, from Friday, as far as the general population is concerned, self-isolation ends. There will be no requirements for self-isolation. We don't know yet whether that will apply to health and social care. You will recall when we first discussed this a couple of months ago, we had separate guidance for health and social care, which was different to that was experienced by the general population. We don't know yet what the announcement on Friday is going to say. I've made inquiries today with Welsh Government. They're not in a position to divulge that, but we might well find ourselves in a position where the guidance that we have to work to is different to that of the general population. So still tricky times. The situation is an improved situation, but not anything that we can take our eye off the ball. Hugely grateful to Gareth and Joe for all their efforts over the Christmas period, particularly that period when I was acting into the Chief Exec's role. It's been hugely demanding on the staff, particularly post-Christmas. Hopefully we're coming to we're starting to see an improved situation. But I just want members to understand that it will be many months before we return to anything that could approach normality. Very grateful for your time, Chair. Thank you.
I was on mute then. I do apologise. Thanks for that, Dave. Do we have any questions? Councillor Etheridge? You're on mute, Kevin.
I'm having problems with the sort of hands function as well, Councillor Cushing, so please excuse me. A number of points for Mr. Street. I'll try and be brief, David. It's all to do with the day centres, really. I understand that on the day centres that you're going to engage an independent organisation. And I was wondering, you know, what the position is in regard to that. Have we gone out to tenders? Have we drawn up a specification? Would Mr. Street please consider putting out a statement to the users and carers on the timescale, consultation and engagement, because he will be aware of the problems last time in regard to questionnaire. I'm hearing that Brooklands are taking more people. Perhaps you could confirm that. And finally, I would like confirmation that effective engagement with users and carers and the unions and the staff, and there will be a joint approach with all officers and the community working together. And perhaps Mr. Street would give us a timetable and assurance that it will all be inclusive and there will be a partnership approach on the day centres. But I would like some kind of sort of written statement if Mr. Street would consider that, because the reason I ask, Chair, is a number of users have actually contacted me, and I've passed through 2 or 3 queries in the last few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. I'll try and tick off those. If I miss any of them, please come back to me. I think in joint approach, I think I can reassure you on that. Hopefully you were reassured when we last spoke about day services. We made it clear that we would be looking to do this in a partnership manner. In terms of the tender you called it, I know Joe has obtained a tender. I can't recall if it's from Pembroke or Powys. She'll tell me in a minute. I think it was Pembroke. For a very similar piece of work with a specification attached. That is currently with Joe and procurement colleagues, and we are on the throes of going out to tender for that. I've got absolutely no problem in communicating where we're at, Councillor Etheridge. I would like to wait to early next week to do that, because that self-isolation guidance of Welsh Government is absolutely key to how we move forward. So I'd like that to reflect that in any communication that we come up. Joe, could you help me out with Brooklands? I know we did do some work at Brooklands, but you will know that detail better than I.
Yes, yeah, no problem. I can confirm it was Pembroke, first of all, Dave, that the tender document is from, and we're actually meeting tomorrow to further progress that. And once we do that, it's our full intention to communicate to everybody with the timeline and engage all the relevant stakeholders. In respect to Brooklands, we are looking to provide an additional session there, and we're working with Assessment Care Management now to identify who can attend that session. And as Dave said, it will also link to any revised guidance that come from Welsh Government, because obviously last time there was different guidance for social care in level 0 than there was for the public. So we need to wait for that guidance as well.
Did I miss any in Councillor Etheridge?
You're on mute, Kevin.
The carers would like some time scale, Mr. Street.
Well, I think to a degree, as Joe has alluded to there, once we've drawn up that specification, we can work on that time scale. But you know, these things, we'll certainly know when that tender will come to fruition. and we'll know when that piece of work will have concluded. It's difficult to come with a time frame beyond that because we don't know what rules we're working to at the moment. Once we know that, that will give us a better idea. Fully aware of the consequences of what we've been through over the last 2 years on some people. But we've been in a very challenging place, particularly over the last few months. The effort has all had to go into hospital discharge. It's been about getting people out of hospital, free those beds up, free the ambulances up, etc., etc. And that has impacted on the speed that we've been able to move forward. But certainly, I think there's no reason why we can't come up with an approximate time frame.
And finally, Mr. Street, in your discussions with the Welsh Government, because obviously the rumours I'm hearing that there's a high possibility on Friday that social distancing basically won't be required. Have you had any detailed discussion with them over that?
I wouldn't quite go far as call it detailed discussion. I've contacted them and asked them whether, that will apply across the board, or again, will there be different guidance for us in health and social care? They haven't given me an answer to that. I understand that answer is likely to come on Friday when the First Minister makes his announcement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Can I just add a quick add on to that, Dave? Because I know I spoke to Dave earlier regarding this, Kevin, and he has been trying very hard to get hold of Welsh Government to find out what the guidance is going to be. Even though we may all be on level 0 around here, it could be totally different in a social care setting. However, one thing I'd like to actually, as a follow-up to that, I know I wasn't in the November meeting, but I was in the one previous to that. We were discussing the questionnaire that was going out to service users and their carers. Has that been done now? Because there was going to be a new questionnaire, because I think the previous questionnaire people were rather dissatisfied with.
Yeah, no, that's all part of the exercise that Joe referred to, the specification we've had from Pembroke. They will help us draft all of that when we appoint the appropriate people to do that. They'll ensure that that questionnaire is fit for purpose. The people are happy with it before it goes out, and help us understand the results and the feedback that we get back.
Okay, thanks very much, Dave, for that. Right, we've got Councillor Bazina now next.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Joe, you've got your hand up. No, there we are.
Oh yeah, can I just come in to say, rather than questionnaires, it's likely, COVID permitting, that we would do engagement sessions. So there will be sessions for carers, members, etc., so that people can have their say, not just on the questionnaire, if it works out as in the Pembrokeshire model, which will be much more engaging for people.
Yeah, oh, lovely. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, Councillor Bazina.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just want to put on record really the thanks to Dave, Joe, and Gareth and all the staff, because obviously social care is has been the most demanding service, especially in particular across COVID, and obviously does struggle. So I just want everyone to know that we are really highly appreciative of all the work, the outstanding work that everybody does. One thing I wanted to ask you, Dave, was so when we've got levels of sickness, there was a point where we were getting other staff from the authority to help out in social care and in other settings. Is that still going on? And do we have a high level of staff who have got long COVID as well? Because that's going to have an impact as well, isn't it, on the service delivery going forward? If we've got staff with long COVID, we have to look after our staff and do the best we can. So if you can answer that, that'd be great. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Councillor Bazina, and thank you for your kind words. We'll make sure they're passed on. In terms of other staff, there were examples where we did that. I mean, obviously, you're pretty limited where carers are concerned, but I know Joe had some pretty acute problems in our care homes with things like cooks, cleaning staff, etc. And we were able to redeploy staff from other parts of the council to help out with that. As far as long COVID is concerned, we do have some examples of that. I don't think the numbers are particularly high, I'm pleased to say. One of the areas where we are seeing some difficulty, and one of the reasons why our sickness levels are higher than perhaps they would normally be, is like, I suppose, everything else. We all know that the NHS has had other things to do, and so lots of sort of routine consultation appointments have been cancelled. That's impacted on some of our staff as well as the general population. So we have perhaps got people were unwell for longer than they would have been because they're waiting for appointments and treatment. Clearly is something we're going to have to watch very carefully moving forward. But at the moment, certainly as far as long COVID is concerned, not particularly high numbers.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I completely get it. I should have been going into surgery soon, but some elective surgery's been cancelled, and it does have a knock-on effect on the service and staff. So thanks for that, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions? Would you like? No, I was going to say. Oh, Councillor Skivins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a follow-up question. Quite some time ago, we had a discussion about whether other authority areas were in exactly the same position as Caerphilly, particularly in relation to day centres and supporting carers with vulnerable, disabled individuals. Have we looked at alternative models since that time, Mr. Street? Because I am getting anecdotal evidence from other authority areas that they have tried different approaches and some blended approaches in using both paid carers and unpaid carers to support families at their residence. Have we looked at that at all?
I mean, all the way through the pandemic, we've been looking at alternative approaches. We've been supporting people in their own home. We've been supporting people with staff and other people out in the community. I don't think we're in any discernible different place to local authorities. Certainly from my conversations with directors, day services is something that's causing us all concern and sleepless nights to a degree. But clearly our priority, certainly over the last 3 or 4 months, has had to be those hospital discharges and supporting those people in the community who have no family or unpaid carers. So I think the blended approach has always been there. It probably isn't happening at the speed that lots of people would like it to happen. But as for the reasons I've sort of talked about 10 minutes ago, we're still significantly constrained. Joe, are you aware of anyone doing anything particularly different from the work that we're doing?
No, from our conversations across our heads of adult services, most people are doing exactly the same thing. Some people are doing online support, which we haven't utilised, but some authorities have done that. We have also utilised some of our shared lives carers for specific people, which have helped provide alternative day sort of opportunities.
Okay, I note your response. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move on to any other, the next item, is there any further questions? No. Steve, you still got your hand up? Okay, then we'll go on to item 7, which is an update on the Integrated Care Fund and Transformation Grant. Programme presentation by an Iron Bevan University Health Board. I'd like to hand over now to Roxanne Green, ICF Portfolio Lead with the Gwent Regional Partnership Board.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me along today. I have prepared a presentation. If I'm okay to demonstrate, if I can share my screen, bear with me just a second. It's a brief presentation intended to give an overview really of the Regional Partnership Board and the use of partnership funding to allow a more informed conversation, and then I'd be very happy to come back at future sessions if you'd like any further detail on any aspects that I discuss with you today. So I'm sharing my screen with you now. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I'm here. I am hosted by an Iron Bevan Health Board. My role is very much cemented really within the Gwent Regional Partnership Board, and I support all tiers within the Regional Partnership Board in both the use of our partnership funding and the development and implementation of our regional programmes of work. So for colleagues who might not have heard from me previously, just to give you a little bit of an overview of our Regional Partnership Board structure, members of your social care teams are, of course, involved in all tiers of the partnership structure. So the Regional Partnership Board, who some of your elected members will be part of, meet with us on a bi-monthly basis, as well as Regional Leadership Group. So Regional Leadership Group is the executive director-led partnership forum to support Regional Partnership Board with its key decision making. Underneath that, we have a number of strategic partnerships that are aligned with our priority population cohorts that are identified in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. And just to give you a slightly different view of that then, so our population cohorts are shown on the screen and how they align with our different strategic partnerships under the auspices of the Regional Partnership Board. Now, it's the members of the Regional Partnership Board that chair the strategic partnerships and have oversight of strategic programmes intending to bring together health, social care and third sector partners as collaborative efforts to try and best support our priority population cohorts. Government introduced partnership funding primarily via what was the Intermediate Care Fund back in 2014, that then became morphed into the Integrated Care Fund. More recently, transformation funding was also provided to the Gwent Regional Partnership Board. And what I share with you on your screen is an overview of all of the partnership funding we have from a revenue perspective, and also an overview of the ICF capital funding that we've had available to us over the last 4 years. So you'll see that we have a healthy allocation of over £36 million on an annual basis, and that brings together a number of funding streams, lots of different policy areas and different dialogue with Welsh Government, different areas of Welsh Government departments. So that has provided with a very comprehensive portfolio of activity. And today I'll just run through on a very high level basis the broad programmes under each of the strategic partnerships. And as I said, if you'd like any further detail, I could come back at a later date. If there's any questions at any time, please do pop your hand up, but of course I'll be happy to take questions at the end. So the first of our strategic partnership programmes is the Carers programme. As a regional partnership board, we invest over 1.2 million in direct support for carers, and also across our partnership organisations, namely our local authority colleagues and our third sector partners. We have over 27 members of staff that are providing direct support. Through this programme, which has grown both in scale and in investment over recent years, we've provided for a regional hub and spoke model. We've utilised ICF capital funding to secure a facility in Torfaen, and we're in the process of identifying and further strengthening the spokes of our carers network. So we use a number of third sector partner organisations in the support of the delivery of our models for carers. And so we have a couple of our larger national organisations, but also some smaller regional third sector organisations that support this area of work. We are currently refreshing our annual outcomes framework, and so we'll be able to provide an end of year report to demonstrate the number of unpaid carers that we would have supported through partnership initiatives, including those that are led on by Caerphilly Local Authority. Our second programme of work, which is actually our largest strategic partnership for the region, is our Gwent Adult Strategic Partnership, who oversees a portfolio of investment of just under £14 million. That portfolio is targeted at 4 key areas of activity. Those are namely our Connected Communities programme, so very much supporting our IAA early intervention and prevention activities, and that's a combination of both local authority, health and third sector led initiatives as well. In addition to that, we have a Keeping Safe at Home programme, which explores alternative models to prevent hospital admission or also support independence, including our use of assistive technology. And I think we've got some great case studies from Caerphilly on our use of assistive technology within some of your care homes, particularly our robotic pets, which have been really successful. Our third programme, and probably our most complex programme, and I know that Dave highlighted a little earlier some of the challenges that we're facing across the system at the moment, is our Improving System Flow programme. So that's a programme that provides a range of capacity across the system, both within health and social care. And this also includes our regional Home First service, which is very much local authority led and works across organisational boundaries to support our flow. Now, obviously, there are challenges at the moment with some of the workforce constraints we're facing, but there's a real commitment in the partnership to continue to improve on that programme and take it forward in the context of the pandemic. The last large programme then under this strategic partnership will be the place-based graduated care programme, and that provides a range of reablement and intermediate care solutions, including step-up, step-down facilities across the region, supporting our citizens to either maintain their independence or regain independence where possible. So you may be familiar with the Discharge to Recover and Assess framework that's been developed and promoted across Wales through the NHS Delivery Unit, and that very much forms the foundation of how we'll take forward our flow and graduated care programmes into the new 5-year programme for the regional partnership boards. As you can see as well, our workforce support in this strategic programme is rather significant, at over 180 members of staff across the region dedicated to this area of work. The third programme is our Mental Health and Learning Disabilities programme, and has a combined investment across funding streams of just over 1.5 million. The workforce, which varies in its nature, is just over 23 full-time equivalents. Most of that is support worker, but there are a lot of coordination activities to ensure that people with learning disabilities are supported in their communities and have access to peer engagement and peer support networks. I think our MyMate service that you might be aware of in Caerphilly, which has gone from strength to strength, is a real example of how partnership funding has enabled the testing and development of a service that's been scaled through the partnership working. Our newer area of activity under this strategic programme is the enhanced foundation tier work, and that's really been developed in the context of the pandemic, because I think we all recognise the impact on emotional health and well-being that the pandemic has had, and that has also been identified as a priority for the Regional Partnership Board going forward into the new programme as well. So in terms of the children and families, apologies for the heading there, this slide is showing the programme headings for the Children and Family Strategic Partnership Board. And this area of activity has really gone from strength to strength. It started as a very small pocket of investment and a relatively small programme of activity about 3 to 4 years ago. And it's grown from a £1 million investment to over £6.3 million of investment during the course of that time. The scale of and the reach of the programmes has also grown. So we initially started with a relatively simple definition of children with complex needs. Helpfully, and set in statute now, the definition of children with complex needs has grown, and as has our portfolio to reflect that. So we know that we have a number of strategic programmes. Some are focused on enhanced edge of care and early intervention and support, so trying to mitigate and support our prevention continuum for children coming into the care sector. There are a number of activities that support that initiative, including mediation support and working with our special guardianship orders as well. So in addition to that, we have a number of activities that support emotional health and well-being for children with complex needs, both children with developmental needs and emotional health and well-being needs. More recently, the foundation of the work of this strategic partnership has been centred around our iceberg model, which the concept of which was to take out specialist capacity closer to home and ensure that our no wrong door approach is cemented within our work within Gwent. Our iceberg model regionally provided the basis for the development of a national framework, which, as you may know, as NEAT or NEST, and that provides the basis of our planning activity going forward as well. And within this strategic partnership, we actually developed a strategy to try and bring as many children from out of county and out of country placements as possible and as appropriate. And as such, we've developed 20 capital schemes to support this endeavour, and an investment of just under £14 million. In terms of our current position, we've undertaken an assessment of our portfolio and have identified areas of good practice and also of areas of learning to help us continue to move forward. Collaborative discussions are still very much underway across all partnership organisations and within each of the strategic partnerships I've just referenced to support the shared development of our programmes of work to support our priority population groups. And in addition, and what we've been working towards really is the development and the implementation of new guidance from Welsh Government for regional partnership boards and the ministerial commitment to a 5-year funding model going forward. That's very much in recognition that the funding that I've referenced to you has been very iterative in nature, and we've been provided with that funding on an annual basis. And that has presented with some challenges in terms of recruitment and retention, but also sustainability of some of the activity that we've developed. In terms of the next steps now, with the new guidance being publicised shortly, it's available, so I can share it with all members if you would like to have a look at it. The new guidance very much provides a clear message on the need to undertake a programme of change over the next 5 years to provide integrated and joint models of care. And I think already within our portfolio, we've got some real good examples where we do have joint models of care that can be strengthened. So our programme development activity is actually the focus of an RPB special meeting of the 1st of February, and we'll be using our areas of activity that I've just shared with you very much as the foundation to build a 5-year strategic programme. And as I suggested, sustainability of our services in the context of a new funding model and some of the challenges that might be presented by that funding model will be at the fore of all of our partnership planning efforts over the next few weeks and months. I've just shared with you here as well a picture of the Nest and Neath framework. Just if you would like any more information on that, please do let me know. But this is essentially the planning tool that will be utilised to develop our whole system approach to children's services going forward. And just as a last slide, really, I've just shared your locality-based initiatives and the investment that you currently receive from revenue funding. If you would like to have any further information on those areas of activity, please do let me know. And thank you very much for inviting me along today. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Is there anybody who would like to my voice is going to talk. Is there anybody who would like to ask questions? I'm not seeing any hands up. This is awful echo. Has somebody got their mic on? Oh, there you are, Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Roxanne, for that really helpful presentation. Could you tell me a little more about what the No Wrong Door initiative means? What does that mean?
Yes, certainly. So No Wrong Door was the Children's Commissioner's report and instruction really to statutory organisations to avoid children and their families going from one service to another. So we've implemented a few different services that support our No Wrong Door approach, mainly our Space Wellbeing Panel. It's a partnership effort to ensure that children and their families have a single point of access into the system. They're reviewed by a multidisciplinary team and then placed on the pathway for the relevant service as needed. So that's really a model that's gone from strength to strength in the partnership, and partnership funding is only a small element that supports that. There's a lot of core resource that goes into the Space Wellbeing Panel, and I would say that that's our primary mechanism for delivering against the No Wrong Door policy. I'm not too sure if colleagues on the call would like to add anything.
Right, thanks for that, Roxanne. Just a quick question. Are there any other organisations or the County Council that are providing similar, if not same services as the Regional Partnership Board, please?
So the services that are within the RPB portfolio, most of which are part of a regional approach, so the services that are being delivered by Caerphilly Council are very much part of a regional approach. So whether it's through our discharge to recover and assess models where we embed OT capacity in the communities, it's very much led by our partnership organisations. We just have a collaborative approach to developing our strategies and models of care.
Oh, lovely, thanks. Are there any other questions? No. Well, I'd just like to express our appreciation, Roxanne, for you coming along and giving us a detailed report. And I'm sure everybody would welcome a copy, as you suggested.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Right, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda now, which is item 8, Budget Monitoring Report. And I'd like now to hand over to Councillor Shane Cook to introduce the report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I didn't get to come in earlier, but I want to thank all our social services staff for their hard work over Christmas, and also to Gareth and Joe for helping to steer the ship when Dave's been off in his absence. And also I want to wish you happy birthday as well, Chair. I didn't get to, so.
That's all right, no worries. And it's St. John Wednesday today as well, and Burns Night. So 25th of January is the best day of the year as far as I'm concerned.
So going back to the report, Chair, Mike Jones will take members through the Director's budget position at month 7. Mike will explain the reasons for the current underspend position and also highlight the areas where we're experiencing financial pressure. Members will be aware from last night's Joint Scrutiny Committee a proposed significant additional funding in the draft budget, and an update on this year's budget will help members understand why budget growth is needed moving forward. Thank you, Chair. And apologies, I have my camera on, but my connection's very, very bad.
Councillor Cushing, are you still there?
Yes, sorry, I did put it on mute. I apologise. Yes, I'm still here. Sorry. Thanks. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is based on the position as at the end of October, at which point we were forecasting a potential underspend of almost £2.9 million. That's a movement of around £2.2 million from the position I reported as at the end of August, which I brought to scrutiny back in November. But hopefully you recall at that meeting, I did explain at that time that additional grant funding had been announced days before that scrutiny meeting, which was likely to increase our underspend by around £2.5 million. So that total grant that was awarded amounted to around £4 million, and 2.3 million of that has been used to offset pockets of overspends within the Directorate, which would account for the entire movement really since my last report. So Appendix 2 provides a bit more detail of how that £4 million has been invested for the members' reference. So the anticipated underspend for the current financial year is very much down really to the combination of additional one-off funding, including that £4 million recovery grant and £1 million in COVID hardship funding, and also down to restricted service provision due to the pandemic. But we are experiencing a significant increase in demand for childcare placements and supported living for vulnerable adults. And we're also seeing a sizable demand for domiciliary care. As Dave has explained, we're struggling to meet that demand at the moment due to staff shortages. But hopefully as we emerge from the pandemic, those staff shortages may ease a little. So those increased demands really are likely to remain with us in the next financial year, but those one-off funding streams and the COVID restrictions are not likely to be there to offset those overspends. So I suppose the overriding message to take from this report really is that despite the large underspend expected for the current financial year, we are facing some significant pressures for next financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Now I'd like to open it up to the committee if they have any questions. Could you press the hands up? Okay, Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a number of points. Perhaps Mr. Street can help me out here. I understand that we've just had local authorities have just had a significant amount from the Welsh Government. I think Caerphilly may benefit from 600,000. I don't know if that's the case. On the underspends of that money, if we don't, I understand 50% may go back to the corporate centre of the council if we don't spend it. So I'd like some clarification on that. In regard to home care, do we have a backlog there? And what measures are in place for the backlog? I'd also like some information on the OT waiting lists. And finally, perhaps Gareth would be kind enough to give me, is there a demand? I assume there is going to be a higher demand now on children's services. Has this increased? And can we cope with the demand because of the number of staff shortages? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. Mike, are you aware, in terms of the amounts that have come to us relatively recently, earlier this week, are you aware of the exact amounts that have been announced?
All I've heard is that there's £50 million being allocated across Wales. If we get our normal share of that based on the RSG settlement, that could be as much as £2.9 million. That funding was announced last week, so again, unfortunately, it was too late to go into this report. Again, that could well increase our underspend for the current financial year. That very much depends on the terms and conditions that are attached to that grant funding, which we haven't heard at the moment. So whether we'll be able to, again, offset it against current pockets of overspends, and we're not sure at the moment. We may have to use that for additional service provision, and waiting for the guidance from Welsh Government on that.
Thank you, Mike.
Just in terms of the children's services placements position, the overspend currently reported in children's services, I think was in the order of, bear with me, £254,000, but there is 1.6 million of recovery fund money offsetting the additional demand for the current year. Otherwise, we'd have a significant pressure in the current year.
Thanks, Mike. That's very helpful. In terms of your second query, Councillor, around 50% the underspend, yeah, 50% of any directorate underspend reverts back to the corporate body and goes into corporate balances. The remaining 50% goes into the social services service reserves. Those reserves are hugely helpful to us in dealing with the one-off costs so we face going forward. In terms of home care, I think I alluded to it when I spoke at the start of the meeting. Our current waiting list for home care is around 450, 460 hours. Almost all of that relates to staff availability. So that's not about money. It's about pairs of hands to actually deliver that care, and recruitment and retention in social care is an issue across the UK. Joe, I'm not sure if you've got that information at hand in terms of the OT waiting list.
Yeah, the OT waiting list, the position remains the same at the moment because the demand has stayed the same. However, on the positive, we've recruited 2 new members of staff and they will be in post by the end of the month. So we're hoping to be able to make a significant dent into that waiting list when those staff come on board. So I can update at the next scrutiny exactly where we are.
And Gareth, could you come in on the children's services issues raised by Councillor Etheridge?
Absolutely, thank you, and thank you for the question. I think it's really important to just acknowledge that even though the complexity of the work that we're dealing with has actually increased, and that links very much to the point that Mike has just made in terms of placement costs going up because some children are more difficult to place, than they have been previously. The overall rate of work hasn't increased throughout the pandemic, so our numbers of children on the Child Protection Register have remained stable, and the number of children that are looked after remains stable. So it's important to just keep that in context, isn't it? So the numbers haven't changed, but the complexity of what we're doing has. In terms of staffing, our staffing position in children's services hasn't significantly changed either. So we're running with the same level of recruitment and retention rates. And I think, to be honest, we had a bit of a wave in terms of self-isolation following the Christmas period, but because of the 5-day reduction, that helped in terms of getting that workforce back into work as quickly as possible. So generally, we're touch wood, we're feeling pretty robust at the moment, and as good as we can be.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, David.
Okay, Councillor Williams, I think you're up next.
Thank you, Chair, and happy birthday. I didn't wish you a happy birthday at the start, but
thank you.
Thank you. Mike, I got a question. Is external residential care 5.3.8, where it says a shortfall of around 326,000, reflecting the reduced levels of income following the sale of service users' property. Could you explain how that works, please?
Certainly. When an individual goes into residential care, they begin paying for their care based on their weekly income, but they are assessed on their other assets as well. Now, obviously, they can't contribute the full cost of their care until they've sold their properties. The income that we've been able to claim from individuals going into care in the early part of the current financial year hasn't been as high as it has been in previous years. So our forecasts for that income for the current year are down on previous years. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Cyril's up next.
What I'd like to know is what is it costing the local authority for domiciliary care per hour? Because we're saying about 10 million and what have you, but I would like to know what's it costing the local authority. I know they're paying about £10 an hour, but what is it actually costing the local authority for a person to go along and work in domiciliary care for an hour?
That very much depends on who's providing that hour, and we do pay different rates for shorter calls as well. So a quarter-hour call or half-hour call, for instance, is proportionately more expensive than a full-hour call. But generally speaking, we're talking somewhere in the order of £20 an hour.
Well, that's pretty cheap because it was £16 an hour about 15 years ago. So you're getting it cheap.
Is that just outside organisations, though, Mike, or is that internally as well, what the real-time cost is for provision of care?
That is based on independent provision, really. But to be honest, I'm not sure that given the increases that we've awarded to independent providers over recent years, the in-house cost isn't far off that either at the moment.
A lot of the independent people are paying £10 an hour now. We had a meeting a couple of months ago and they're paying £10 an hour and they still can't get staff. I thought it'd be something like about £26, £30 an hour cost to the local authority.
Well, we must be thankful then, Cyril. It's not as highly reflected, I think, really. But it would be interesting, maybe for a future session, to have that real-time cost, whether it be independent or internally, what the real-time cost would be to ourselves as a council, whether it be on the half-hourly or the hourly rate. Okay, then I think next up now we've got Charlotte. Is your hand? Yeah, Charlotte. If you'd like to ask your question.
Hi. With the increase in mental health that we are seeing now and expected to increase from COVID, is that reflected in the budget? And is precautions and something in place ready for this as it increases?
It's certainly not reflected in the 21-22 budget, and the forecasts that I've provided in the report are based on levels of care being provided as at the end of October. So any increases since then won't be reflected in those forecasts. However, there is significant growth being considered for social care within the corporate budget strategy at the moment, which is currently out for discussion. So hopefully that will be there to go towards that additional pressure.
Thank you. Sorry, Dave, did you was the provisions put in place ready?
I mean, it's one of those things. We know there's going to be increased demand. So as Mike said, that's part of why, you know, one of the questions I suppose I've been readying myself over the last couple of nights is, well, why do social services need 6 million growth when you're £2 million underspent? But it's because of this. It's because of that latent unmet demand that we know is coming to us. Mental health is particularly complex because, of course, we are only part of that mental health journey. It's sort of primary care and GP services that will bear the brunt of that initially, but it's inevitable that some of that demand will make its way into social care. So that's why we have to be flexible. That's why I referred to the service reserves when I answered Councillor Etheridge's. It just gives us that little bit of leeway that we can respond and be flexible as and when demand changes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that okay with you, Charlotte?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to ask Councillor Steve Skivins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Two-part question from me. In our budget forecasting meeting, the authority's got the intention of moving up to paying the full living wage for external service providers. So the first part of the question is, has that been factored into the social services budget going forward? Because there will be an increase on a minimum entry level. And the second part is, what is the actual logistics of checking that external providers are actually paying that and not putting it on their own margins? I think that's a very difficult thing to achieve. Obviously, we want to see people being appropriately paid, but when we're dealing with the private sector, that gets a little bit more complicated. So I'd like the wisdom from the meeting how we do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the $1 million question. You know, the real living wage has been factored into next year's budget. That's right. A significant part of that 6 million. I don't think you were at last night's meeting, Councillor Skivins, if I recall.
No, I wasn't.
But you know, you will see in the uplift figure for social services, it was somewhere like 6.5 million, and a major component of that is our ability to pay the real living wage. There will be an expectation on us that when we make that funding available, that we do ensure that it is paid over. So, you know, we do visit homes, we do visit domiciliary care agencies. That's usually to look at the quality of the care they're delivering. But from here on in, we're clearly going to have to factor in some work to see that is actually being paid over. It's not something I lie awake at night and worry about, because what we've found is around about 60% of the providers are already paying real living wage or above. So, you know, some have done it out of choice without any inducement or funding from the council or the government. It's that 40% that we would probably want to turn our attention to, people who we're expecting to pay it for the first time. I think it's a curious position to be in, because I think by definition they'll have to pay it, because it'll be the only way they will be able to recruit. If
Yeah.
all the other agencies are doing it and they are not only will they not be able to recruit, they won't be able to keep the people they've already got.
Yeah.
So I think by definition, market forces will drive it. But there will be a clear expectation on Welsh Government's part that we do monitor those providers to ensure the money is being handed over in the way they expect it to be.
Yep. Thanks for that, Paul Block.
Yeah, I would
That's
assume it'd be something that would be written into their contract anyway, Dave. And obviously, then the responsibility of policing would fall on ourselves to make sure that they are compliant, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just add in there. Up until last year, I was actually running a recruitment company, and the way that those contracts are structured can be very complex, and certainly charges for different items and so on can eat into the bottom line and almost reduce people back down to the minimum wage, not the living wage. So
you're absolutely right, and that's why the monitoring is so key. You know, I remember previous examples where providers had given uplifts to their staff, but then started charging them for particular services.
Yeah.
So you know, we need to make sure that isn't the case, and it is a real increase that the employee is able to take home at the end of every week, every month, whatever it might be.
Okay.
I just like to add that we were an ethical payer.
Anything else?
You work for the good guys, Steve. Right, Councillor Etheridge, I think you're up next.
Yeah, one final point for Mr. Street. Mr. Street, what would you say is your biggest worry? Is it resources, staffing issues, monitoring, going forward?
I think I got three of them, and it's staff. It's our ability to recruit and retain staff throughout the organisation, and that is nothing because Caerphilly isn't doing something or doing something everyone else. It is a problem across the UK. You've seen it on the TV every night. You can see the NHS and almost all parts of the public sector beginning to struggle, and we are really struggling with recruitment. Our independent sector partners are also struggling, hence why things like the real living wage may help. I'm not holding my breath, if I'm honest. I'm not sure £9.90 is going to make people change careers. The view of sort of Association of Directors of Social Services is an hourly rate of about £12 an hour is going to be necessary to make people think they want to come into social care. You know, historically, we've always struggled in things like children's services, social workers to work in mental health. Those pressures haven't gone away. We're aware of other authorities beginning to increase their salary level. Watch that very closely. So it is, you know, resources wise, we're fine. You can see that from a budget report. We've got some excellent staff in the right places. We've got good relationships with our independent sector providers. But the collective ability of social care to recruit and retain staff is becoming a bigger problem by the day.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that then, Dave. Are there any other questions? No, I think I did actually have a couple of questions I'd like to ask Dave. The one is this 50%. Oh, first of all, can I ask Mike, do we expect to spend more of what we've got left in the budget by the end of the financial year? And if so, do you have some sort of estimate on how much of that we will actually spend? Because obviously the least we have left as an underspend, the better.
Mike, you're on mute.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, the position I reported was the position at the end of October. I think since then, as Dave said, the waiting lists for home care, for domiciliary care, have reduced a bit. But then, as he's also reported, there's some services being handed back. So, not sure that there's going to be a significant movement in the position that I've reported, albeit that additional grant funding that has been announced is likely, if anything, to increase the underspend. And in terms of trying to spend that money, as Dave's alluded to, it's difficult to recruit the staff to be able to to be able to spend it on, whether that is internally or in the independent sector.
It's quite disconcerting. Sorry, can I just go back a bit? That additional funding that we received recently, would you be eligible to keep that additional funding, because it's only given 3 months really to the end of the financial year? I know it'll probably be added on to the initial underspend, but obviously realistically, would that be able to go back into social services reserve funding, or will it go to corporate? And secondly, with the money that goes into the 50% that goes to corporate, where does that go?
Where it goes into the general reserve. So when you're at your council meetings like you were last night and will be again tomorrow, when we refer to taking money from a general reserve, that's basically where those monies have gone. So it can be used for absolutely anything the members choose to use it for. It's not limited to social care. It can be used for any part of the council's business. Mike, in terms of the sort of grant that we had yesterday, presumably that will be dependent on the grant conditions?
Very much so. If we have to evidence that the money has been spent on specific issues, then we're going to struggle to spend the full allocation, in which case some of it will have to go back to Welsh Government. But if it's just a general grant to underwrite the costs that we've been incurring, then yes, we'd get to keep that grant. And as you said, 50% of that would go back to the corporate body, and 50% would stay in social services reserves for use in future years. And probably in terms of the use of corporate reserves, probably a good example from the report that was discussed last night was the increase in the COVID reserve that has been proposed by the corporate body. So if we contribute any additional underspend to the corporate body, then perhaps that could be considered as topping up that COVID reserve.
Right, okay then. So it was because like I asked the question last night about bringing forward the information regarding what's in the reserves and what it's earmarked for. So I'll look forward to actually receiving that report when it's available. Okay, are there any other further questions to ask members? No? Right, if you could just bear with me, I do apologise, I'm flicking back and forth. Right, well, the recommendation is on page 17 of your packs. Members are asked to note that the projected underspend of £2,896,000 against the social services budget for 21-22, inclusive of transport costs, includes a number of non-recurring underspends attributed to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which masks an underlying increase in demand for social care, along with significant inflationary pressures within the social care market. And obviously then this has been duly noted. Right, I think we've now come to the end of our meeting. And I'm quite pleased that we've finished before 7 o'clock for a change. So I'd like to wish everybody a very